Why do we, as women, often lose interest in sex after we get married? One of the main reasons is that each time we engage in sex, it feels like we're giving away a part of ourselves that we don't have to spare. We start to feel like mere objects, with our husbands taking something from us that isn't available to give. This stems from a deep disconnection from our own selves and an unhealthy relationship with who we are, what I call being profoundly unhappy. When we aren't truly present within ourselves, we have nothing left to offer. From this place of disconnection and inner turmoil, we become drained and empty because we continually prioritize everyone else over ourselves. We often overlook our own needs and fail to nurture ourselves in ways that would make us feel complete and overflowing with vitality. If we felt this abundance, we could generously share it with our husbands, children, and everyone else in our lives. Ironically, while we are masters at putting ourselves at the bottom of the priority list, we may be seen as selfish or self-absorbed. This constant self-neglect drains us, leaving us feeling hollow and exhausted. From this void, we hold back on sex because we are utterly depleted and have nothing left to give. The second reason we lose interest in and stop wanting sex in our marriages is rooted in self-punishment. We convince ourselves that we don't deserve pleasure because we feel so terrible about who we are inside. Our insecurities plague us, as we constantly compare ourselves to other women and their seemingly perfect lives. We criticize our physical appearance and mentally beat ourselves up. Even though we might put on a brave face and pretend everything is fine, deep down we know the truth, we feel inadequate. As a result, we deny ourselves anything that could bring us joy. Sex, meant to be a source of pleasure, becomes another casualty of our poor self-image, shutting down our desire completely. The third reason lies in our deep-seated need for control. As we age, we become more rigid and fearful, desperately trying to manage every aspect of our lives. Sex, with its inherent spontaneity and need for relaxation, challenges this tight grip we hold. We lose the joy and sense of adventure that we once had when we were younger and more carefree. The thought of letting go and truly enjoying sex becomes daunting. This fear of losing control is something we frequently bury and refuse to acknowledge. The fourth reason stems from our lack of understanding about enjoying sex for ourselves. From the beginning, we engaged in sexual encounters for all the wrong reasons, using it as a tool for manipulation or to fulfill a need for validation and affection. We put on a facade, mirroring what we thought men desired from adult websites, without ever considering our own desires and preferences. This failure to explore our own pleasure led to a suppression of our sexual urges. Good men crave authenticity in the bedroom, but societal expectations and false beliefs about sexual pleasure only serve to complicate matters. When we take the time to delve into our own desires and understand ourselves intimately, we discover that sex becomes a simpler and more fulfilling experience. This morning, my husband told me, "I'm just so glad you're being true to yourself and know what you enjoy." I felt so happy hearing him say that. When he asked about my show, he said, "Yeah, sex is definitely more fun now. It's all about understanding yourself and what you like. For many of us women, sex can be quite confusing. Men often see it as a simple physical pleasure, but an experience designed to be enjoyable. We have all the necessary parts to take pleasure in it. However, as women, we often tie sex to emotions and equate it with love. For a long time, I thought sex was about forming relationships and that it represented love. That perspective couldn't be more mistaken. Sex is a physical activity meant to be enjoyed, and in marriage it's something to share with our husbands. Many women haven't taken the time to discover their own sexual preferences. We often don't know our own bodies, let alone understand them sexually, because we've turned it into something daunting and overwhelming. We are often unsure of what we like or dislike. Since we've never learned to take pleasure in sex for ourselves and explored our preferences, we end up believing all the myths society, psychology, friends, and books tell us. These myths suggest that we're like ovens needing to be preheated, that we require lots of foreplay, that we must achieve an orgasm every time, that the experience must last long, and that our husbands should do all the work to get us in the mood. These notions are misleading, and reason number 5 will explain why. Ultimately, the fifth and most crucial explanation as it addresses the core issue. The fifth reason why women lose interest in sex and stop desiring it after marriage is that we have diminished our husbands to the extent that we are no longer attracted to them. Let me emphasize this again because it's vital. We have weakened our husbands to the point where we find them unattractive. This happens when we emasculate them by shaming them, constantly pointing out their faults, criticizing everything they do, persistently conveying that they aren't good enough, continually trying to change them, and treating them like children. Naturally, our attraction to them wanes after this treatment. A word frequently used to describe this outcome, and I reached this point myself, though it wasn't my husband's fault but my own, is repulsed. We become repulsed by them. This repulsion is a direct result of our actions. By emasculating our husbands, we create a situation where we no longer find them appealing, and this is entirely due to our own behavior. We're being cruel and unkind. This behavior stems from our deep-seated dislike for ourselves. We often don't recognize this because we're misled into thinking these feelings come from our past, our upbringing, family, or childhood. But those aren't the real reasons. We're not taught to take responsibility for our own feelings and actions. The truth is, we don't feel good about ourselves because of the choices we make and how we conduct ourselves in our marriages. As a result, we project our self-repulsion onto our husbands, weakening them and diminishing our attraction to them. This is why, as women, we often lose interest in sex and stop wanting it after we get married.